I think, around WikiLeaks, for the past few years we've seen a number of different countries use national security as a guise for censoring the internet. We've seen that in India, we've seen it in Brazil, we've seen it all over the world, and so basically what we're seeing is the US doing the same thing in so many words. I mean, they're not actually going and censoring the WikiLeaks websites, but, they're sort of doing it through private means. You've got, Senator Joseph Lieberman. Now, granted, the government obviously is sort of a diverse entity, but you've got Senator Joseph Lieberman calling for Amazon and other companies to take down WikiLeaks content. You've got the DNS host that also removed WikiLeaks from its site, and so you've got all of these sort of issues around the censorship of WikiLeaks in this country. And so I think that it's sort of bringing to the forefront this debate around national security as a whether or not it's a valid reason, valid justification for censorship. But the fact of the matter is that when it comes to account deactivations and content removal, this occurs on an extraordinary level, from Egyptian activists having their account removed on Facebook because they decided to use a fake name, to political pages being removed from other sites because they hate speech being speech you don't like rather than actual hate speech. And so we see these incidents every single day. We see companies kind of taking measures into their own hands, and so I think that it's a very slippery slope to say that it's okay to remove WikiLeaks from Amazon is essentially, setting in forth this motion that will allow it to happen to anyone.
And what to you, in your opinion, is the impact, as you've been following these freedom of expression issues, of people who are taking matters into their own hands and taking actions that could be called civil disobedience in the offline world?
Right, so I think what you're referring to in this case is the sort of DDoS, distributed denial of service attacks, that Anonymous and other perpetrators have done against major sites like Visa and MasterCard. And, I struggle with this one because problematically, distributed denial of service attacks are most commonly used against small independent media and human rights organizations. And so while they can be used against these giant global entities, they can also be used to completely silence other voices. And so, it's kind of like the difference between staging a sit-in outside the New York Times versus staging a sit-in at your local tiny newspaper. One might cripple a magazine while the other might just cause it the loss of some funds, and so it's kind of a difficult choice. I think that legitimizing DDoS as a means of civil disobedience can sort of run the risk of legitimizing it on the whole to silence voices, and so I've kind of taken the approach that I think that there are better strategies out there and that really isn't the solution.
Right, and so, I think people noted that there's a key distinction between a hacker going after PBS and a hacker going after Amazon. Do you see that distinction as well? I do, but I'm not convinced, and I hope that this doesn't get my own site DDoSed, I'm not convinced that some of these groups like Anonymous necessarily take those ethics into account. Right.
So the U.S. government, the State Department in particular, their Internet Freedom Agenda has been great in terms of bringing into the national conversation this idea of internet freedom, and so in that sense I'm thrilled with what the US government is doing. On the other hand, there's also funding involved. It's not just about rhetoric, so while the rhetoric can be great, the funding becomes an issue as well. There's been a lot of debate around circumvention technology, for example. To me, circumvention technology, which allows people to get around blocked websites in different countries, is essentially putting a band-aid on a giant open wound, and so rather than look at it at that level, I think that the government should be looking at it at other levels. There are a number of governments that conduct internet censorship by using tools built by American companies, and that's one of the issues that I think gets very little attention here, and needs to be given attention. And it's not just an issue of corporate social responsibility, it's also an issue of export. Should this be controlled? And I tend to think it should be.